Sam Kahn, there he is. Wearing Texas Tech colors today, Sam?
No, Buc-ee's.
Oh, yeah. Buc-ee's, of course, they have one in Temple. Then they now have one in Hillsboro. And then, of course, up in the Dallas. They're everywhere. They're just monstrous, like big, huge, monstrous stores. All right, so Colorado, Texas Tech. We're going to have Brock Hewitt on a little bit later on who's doing that game. I asked this question earlier to our chat. Of the three ranked teams playing this weekend, Iowa State at KU, Colorado at Tech, and then BYU in the Holy War at Utah. Which of those three do you think is most likely on upset alert?
I would say Colorado just because I would say BYU Utah is close, but I just don't know if Utah is good enough. The rivalry aspect of that is interesting to me, but Colorado at Tech to me feels like the most ripe for an upset just because Tech finally showed that they can play defense last week against Iowa State, and that's something I think that's been an Achilles heel for this team all year long. And if they can do that, we know they can score because they've been one of the best offenses in the Big 12 all year. Statistically, I think for up until last week, they were the best. And so to me, when you put that all together with the charged atmosphere you're going to get at the Jones, I think Tech is really in the mix, could put themselves in the mix for a Big 12 title game here. And I think Colorado has played enough games where they've been, they've won close. Remember the Baylor game? Yep. Of course, they lost the K-State game, close at the end. They've kind of been in some tight games that would make me think this one will be too. And so I would, out of those three, I would pick Colorado to be the one most on upset alert here.
And to me, it's not really a negative comment about Colorado, but if Tech wins that game in Lubbock, then I don't even know if it's an upset other than the fact Colorado's got a number to the left of its name.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the Texas Tech's a good team. I think they should have beaten TCU. So the only really two games that I think they got outclassed in were against Washington State and Baylor. The TCU game, they were up, multiples 3 scores, and they should have held on to that one. TCU, give them credit for coming back in that. But this is a Tech team that's played pretty good football all year, save for the very first start of the season. But I feel like they've got an identity, I feel like. And if I feel like they're turning the corner a little bit here, I think the resilience of them to go get that upset, especially with all the noise of what was going on with the helmet communications and all that stuff the week before, I think it says a lot. And to them to go get a big road win like that, I think it was a big step forward in the Joey McGuire era.
So Kansas State and Iowa State both lose, as you know, last weekend. The standings come out this week. And BYU's 9, although if they win the Big 12 and they keep playing, they'll be a top 4, get a bye. Other than that, who among those that are still involved in winning the Big 12, like you might see a team get on a run at the end, play for the game, and upset somebody, who will be, if Big 12 gets 2 teams in the playoff, who will that be in your opinion?
I still am going to put my money on Kansas State. And here's why. I feel like we've forgotten about them a little bit here just because they lost to Houston, which was a tough loss. And they are a team that, for whatever reason, I feel like every year they drop a game they shouldn't. And whether it happens early or whether it happens in midseason, but for whatever reason, they are able to get better as the year goes on. They're able to finish strong. Chris Kleiman has been able to get this team, I think, to perform at a high level late in the season in November in his time there. And so I would not be surprised if they go on a run here late and end up in the Big 12 title game and end up possibly winning the Big 12 title game. I think the thing is I think they are going to go as Avery Johnson goes. If he takes care of the ball, they're in good shape. If he does not, which he didn't against BYU and he didn't against Houston, then things kind of turn for them. But I still think he's a good quarterback. He's just a young quarterback. He's going to make some mistakes. And so even though Iowa State has been the more consistent team all year, I still feel like the ceiling is higher for Kansas State.
I brought this up, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday with Iowa State losing at home to Tech. And Tech, they got it done the last drive in less than 2 minutes with Taj Brooks scoring. There's a reason why, and I hate to bring it up because I like what Matt Campbell does. I know a lot of people, obviously the AD and others inside the athletic department. Sam, they haven't won a Big 12, or they have not won a conference title since the 1912 season. Isn't the loss against Tech one of the reasons why, even when they have had a team that is pretty good, they just seem like there's that, and in this conference, a lot of people blow a tire. It's incredibly unbelievable that it's been that long for that football program.
Yeah, it's just, you have some programs that have just been at a certain level for a lot of their existence. We've seen that in college sports a lot, and Iowa State's been one of them. And that's why Matt Campbell has been lauded for the job he's done, because he's gotten them to the point where now we expect them to be better. We don't expect them to lose a game like that, even though it does happen. He's raised the floor on that program to a level that it really hasn't been. And I think he deserves be commended for that. That said, I will say, and this is why I say the ceiling is a little bit lower on them, Campbell builds his program on winning on the margins. He likes to use that term, winning on the margins, which means we're gonna win, in little small areas. We're gonna outwork you, or we're gonna be a little cleaner, and that's great. But when it comes to playing for a championship, sometimes you just got to be able to go put your foot on someone's throat.
Mm-hmm.
And they escaped a close one against Iowa. I even remember when they played Houston, they were only up 3-0 at halftime against a Houston team that at that time offensively was awful. And so they like, you've got to be able to, they were even down, you remember 14-3 to Baylor. Then they eventually came back and put the foot on the gas. I would have loved to see Iowa State come out with a 21-0 lead against one of these teams, one of these power conference teams, to show me that you can assert your will. But that's just not the style of football they play. And so if you're going to play a game close to the vest, which, and I'm going to say that I don't think it's a bad strategy for that program, because that program is not going to recruit 4- and 5-star athletes on an annual basis. And so I understand why they do it that way, and it has been largely successful, but it leaves you a small room for error, so that if you are playing games that are that close to the vest, if you do make a couple of turnovers or you do have some bad mistakes, then it's going to end up costing you, like it did against Texas Tech.
Clint Moses in the chat, K-State is one-dimensional running the ball. Iowa State not great at one thing, but fundamentally sound.
I think Iowa State is defensively. That's the thing, is you can hang your hat on Iowa State defensively. As long as John Haycock is there, they're going to be one of the best defenses in the country. I agree, K-State is not as effective throwing the ball, but that one strength that they have with Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, and DJ Giddens, it is a really impressive strength. And I go back to the fact that they just have to take care of the ball. This is not new that Kansas State has, is more of a run-heavy team. That's the style they've been. They were that style under Bill Snyder. They're that style under Chris Kleiman. They're never going to be a team that throws the ball for 400 yards. But I still do think the ceiling on Avery Johnson, I think he will grow as a passer over time. And I still think there's untapped potential there for him, which is why I like where they're headed.
Sam, if we get to the last week of the college football playoff standings, and there are a pretty good chunk of teams that have no losses, and there's only a handful left, no losses, 1 loss, or 2 losses. And we're talking about the FBS, maybe 2 to 3 teams, of course, like Army and Boise State, see what they're doing as well. Washington State, maybe. But if we get to that last meeting with all these guys and the women on that committee, can you see a scenario where a 3-loss team can get in ahead of everybody else that has 2 losses or left? There's 12 teams, so there's a lot. But should that happen?
So those are 2 different questions. Can I see it happening? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I can see it happening. Should it happen? Probably not, but you'd have to look at the resumes at that time. But I will say this. We're already setting up that narrative now with Alabama LSU this week, because you're going to have people say that if Alabama loses to LSU and they're sitting there at 3 losses, they're not going to count them out of the playoff because they're going to say, well, they have that win over Georgia, which is true. It is one of the best wins that anybody has on the resume, and that's going to kind of carry them. So could a 3-loss Alabama get in over a 2-loss Big 12 or ACC team? Honestly, the way this thing has gone in the first 10 years, I'd be surprised if Alabama did get in over a 2-loss ACC or Big 12 team. And that's not to say that I agree with it. I don't. but that's just what the committee has taught us. Look at where BYU is in the ranking. And I know you guys were talking about this earlier this week, and Craig made a point, well, it doesn't matter until if BYU just takes care of business. That's true. But I look at it this way. Why is BYU, who is undefeated, who has wins over 2 top 25 teams, who has a comparable strength of schedule to Penn State, if you go the records of the teams that they've played, it's pretty even with Penn State. Why is Penn State 3 spots ahead of them, three spots ahead of BYU when they don't have as good of a resume? I don't get it.
And they just lost. And they at home. And I know Ohio State's really good, but it's interesting like that. It's almost like it's as if people don't think that college football can survive a postseason or a playoff if Alabama's not included. The NFL can have Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl with unbelievable ratings without the Cowboys involved the last 27 years or so, right? So you let it play out. Now, their losses to Alabama would be Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and then LSU, and all of them most likely in the top 25. But eventually, you got to win, no matter who you're playing.
That's right.
You got to win games.
Right.
Yeah.
It's who did you beat? That's what I like to know. Who did you beat? And now they did beat Georgia. And so as long as Georgia's in the top 5, that is going to carry them, and it deserves weight. But after that, who else did you beat is my question.
Yeah.
And that's where the Big 12 schools don't get the benefit of the doubt, because none of those schools in the Big 12 are favored nations. They're not helmet schools. They're not big brands in the way that Alabama or Notre Dame or Ohio State or some of these other blue bloods are. And so whether we like it or not, and you know it, go back to 2014, the first year of the playoff, we were debating Ohio State versus TCU and Baylor and who won out. And we were talking about data points and all this. If they had been Ohio State and Texas and Oklahoma, do you think that it would have turned out the same way?
No. If you would take TCU and put Texas on their uniform, or take Baylor and put OU on their uniform, then Ohio State, who did win the championship, they got on the run with Cardell Jones, that they'd never make that 14 playoff. And that's, I think, where there's a lack of trust. Listen, I get it, and I understand that if everybody in the Big 12 was in the SEC and played the schedule, they probably would have at least a couple more losses a year. But we don't know. We can't just take that for granted. Remember Dewey and Truman? We didn't know. Or Trump and Hillary? We didn't know, right? I mean, we that's why you play the game or whatever. Sam, one more thing.
Could you imagine the NFL if we just said,
oh, God.
Okay, you guys in the AFC South, you guys only get one team in, but if you're in the AFC North, you're going to get 3.
Yeah, or for about 25 years, you could have 3 teams in the NFC East be in because they dominated the Super Bowls and championships. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's cyclical. That's another thing about even conferences, that sometimes even those that like, oh my God, they're going to win forever, are going to be cyclical. It's the way it was. It's the way it is. I like what Saban did at Alabama. There's no question what he did was stupid good. But man, eventually, I think sometimes that fans who see logos, and I'm not really complaining about the logos because that's part of why college football is great, but you look at, well, they lost to so-and-so, and as you said, who have they beaten? Okay, they beat Georgia. Yeah. That's fine. But, I love what you said about the AFC South or it does. The most popular teams in the NFL, they got to win. You got to win to qualify to get into the NFL playoffs. Sam?
And it becomes circular reasoning, because then the SEC and the Big Ten, if only one Big 12 team gets in and then it gets knocked out early, this is going to be used as evidence when the SEC and the Big Ten try to ram through extra automatic bids in the next playoff iteration. When, oh, by the way, a couple of years ago, we had TCU get all the way to the national championship game, even though nobody thought that they could, and nobody gave them really much of a chance against Michigan, and they still did it. All I like to see, doesn't matter to me who wins or loses. I just like access, just a chance, an opportunity on the field to prove it. If Michigan is better, or if Ohio State is better, or if Alabama is better, fine. Let's just find out on the field rather than let's just arbitrarily say, well, you guys aren't good enough because you don't look good enough. And so we're just going to exclude you from the whole thing.
And then if TCU does beat Michigan, and all we hear about is how much Georgia beat the hell out of TCU. It's like that game didn't count. They did beat Michigan, though. Well, yeah, but they got beat 65-7 by Georgia. And most everybody who played Georgia would have been beaten pretty badly by that team. Sam, have a great weekend, buddy. Thanks for your time as always.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Sam Conn, theathletic.com. Love his work. Follow his Twitter feed.